Okay, this is Pops from Legal Reform, unaccompanied adult elsewhere. Okay, as I told you, the stuff I've been doing for a long time. And surprisingly, once in a while, they answer my complaints. And I was surprised I got an answer from the Attorney Registration and Disciplinary Commission of the Supreme Court of Illinois. Dear Mr. Casares, we have received your request for an investigation of Marla G. Clevinge, who was the Assistant State's Attorney in your 1989 criminal case. I'm sorry, it's on my phone and I'm old. Initially, please understand the duties of the agency relate widely to investigating and processing allegations of professional misconduct against lawyers. We have sufficient evidence of members by a lawyer. Yes, we may be able to stop the law or mad to continue practicing law. Okay, so we cannot review or intervene in court proceedings in any way. And I didn't ask them to intervene in any court proceedings. I literally filed a complaint for multiple violations of the rules of professional conduct and the code of judicial conduct. In this complaint, I went after the state's attorney first. And when I cited my complaint, I cited Rule 3.8, special responsibilities of prosecutor first, and then stated all the rules that they violated. And they violated, forgot what rule, but reporting misconduct, because they didn't cite my attorney for ineffective assistance of counsel for failure to disclose. All I wanted was full disclosure. I wanted the hospital reports, police reports. I wanted the testimony from the preliminary hearing. They wouldn't give me anything. I wasn't allowed anything. And if I was allowed everything that that they withheld from me, I could have used that. And just start from the very beginning. Nobody played by the rules and the codes, and that's what I stated. So the state's attorney was supposed to report my lawyer and the judge for judicial misconduct, violating the code of judicial conduct, specifically for not citing my attorney, for ineffective assistance of counsel, professional misconduct, and all the rules he broke, failure to communicate, diligence, expediting litigation, which requires him to divulge disclosure to me. That's his job. And it's the state's attorney and the judge's job to make sure that he does that. But they kept telling me, the judge said, no, I didn't need that. When I wanted a hospital report, what are you, a doctor? I don't need to be a doctor. Is it in English? It's not written in a language that only doctors can understand. Oh man, it's just crazy. But they didn't want to give me anything. So either way, they deflected and said they're not going to do their job. All I did was want them to take everybody down for this conspiracy against rights under the color of law. That's all I wanted. Do your job. And you could see in one of my other videos, I went to the FBI. They forwarded it to DOJ. And the reason I stopped pushing it is because the CPD caught me and told me to leave it alone. You made it out alive. You're still here. And I already knew what might happen if I pursued this conspiracy against rights under the color of law. But it already happened. I got the life beat out of me while I was in Cook County Jail. Everybody was surprised I survived. I was surprised I survived. guess sometimes prayers do work. But either way, promises made, promises kept. I promised the Almighty that I would see this through so that it never happens to anybody else. What happened to me happens to them. And I didn't make this promise just that day. When I first put this together, this thing about a conspiracy against rights under the color of law, that was in 1979. I went to prison for another crime I didn't commit. Actually, I didn't know the guy personally, but I met him through other people, and there was no way anybody could have confused him from me. The police knew. They didn't want the police to testify because his investigation came to the same conclusion mine did, and they were upset that the detective McMahon said he was upset because I was interfering with his investigation. And I knew he was legally obligated to investigate the case for any probable cause and to see if there was a case, and there was a case, but to see who did it. And he found out who did it, and he knew it wasn't me. And when I questioned him personally, how many witnesses? Oh, there was over 100 out there. Well, why'd you bring the only 6 that said it was me? Well, not everybody said it was the same person. They all kept saying it was someone else's. But either way, every time I was in court for anything, as a defendant, as the plaintiff, I never saw justice. People came to my house and tried to kill me. Cops never filed a report, never did anything. I had people come to my house and literally attack my wife and son while I wasn't there. Tried to throw them down a flight of stairs, steep flight of cement stairs. That fall could have killed an adult, yet alone a child. But the judge threw it out. Wasn't gonna put these good people away because of some ex-convict. I had no involvement in it, but they did it because they are upset with me because I didn't do something that they instructed me to do. So instead of taking it out on me, they waited till I wasn't home and took it out on my wife and newborn. Now, does due process exist? Not in my life. Did I ever get a fair trial? Not once. I mean, the presumption of innocence is gone the moment you're arrested. From the point of your arrest, the presumption of guilt is there, which is illegal. And then it's always devoid of a quick and speedy trial. No matter how many times I demanded a quick and speedy trial, which I knew I had a right to, they said, no, we got issues to settle. And the issues they tried to settle was trying to convince me to take a plea deal. Not nearly a year, both times. I give up, we're going to court. And the first time they compiled the charges, compounded them. The state's attorney was pissed because I wouldn't accept the plea deal, so kept adding charges. Went from 1 to 2 to 4 to 6 to 8 to 16. And the judge convicted me, and that was violating the double jeopardy clause. But they didn't know I knew that. And at any time I tried to open my mouth in court, the judge was pissed. You know, the court jesters, they'll attack you, drag you in the back for contempt of court, unalive you. You don't talk to the judge like that. The judge is literally breaking the law. If they were enforcing the law, shouldn't they be enforcing every law the judge is breaking? Failure to abide by the oath, failure to abide by the code of judicial conduct, fail to enforce the code of judicial conduct because any misconduct by any lawyer or judge, the judge is legally obligated to report that misconduct to the proper authorities and to let that person continue with that misconduct, to let that person continue to represent they're no longer effective assistant counsel. They never were. They are defective, destructive assistants of counsel. So all it was is theater. The presumption of guilt was upon arrest, and I had to fight my way out of it, and I couldn't. Nobody, I wasn't allowed disclosure. I wanted full disclosure. They said no. The judge said no. It's up to the judge. The judge was king. The judge is above the law. There are penalties for violating the oath. There are penalties for violating the rule of law, which that was the first thing that they did, violated the rule of law. Violated the letter of the law. And that misrepresentation, that's disinformation. There's penalties for violating, for disinformation. There's penalties for the lack of informed consent. They're required to get my informed consent before anything can proceed. And nobody gave me the reasonable knowledge to make an informed decision to give informed consent. How could I do that without having disclosure, without having discovery, facts pertinent to the case? In both cases, they kept all the facts out and just took my word against theirs, and in each time, they failed to prove any guilt, which is illegal. Like I said, no matter, I was explaining to a judge, see, I won in civil court. I was sued for the same case, but I won because I had to go pro se because the insurance company got a declaratory judgment or summary judgment, I think, against me. And they said I was under some psychiatric care and it wasn't reported. Some kind of crazy stuff. So they, and I wasn't informed. So I never had a chance to reply. Otherwise, I would have went in there with the rules of professional conduct and the code of judicial conduct and cited everybody for a conspiracy against rights under the color of law. And started going over the rules, the codes, the mandatories of, first I would have cited the oath, because the rules and the codes is behind that oath. When you take the oath to uphold, support, and defend the Constitution, giving a person due process, giving a person a fair trial, assuring that they have effective assistance of counsel, ensuring a quick and speedy trial. And they all have limitations, and if they exceed that time limit, the case gets tossed out. Look up quick and speedy trial. No matter what your state, it'll come up. And you'll find out that's not happening. And they're doing the same thing to all those people they did to me. Tried to talk them into a plea deal. And so much time will elapse, they'll say, hey, listen, you take this and you could be out in a couple of weeks, a couple of months. And that's always under duress. That's illegal. So that's what I do on legal reform. When you see my videos on TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, wherever you see them, That's all I'm trying to do. So if I can get this to happen, you know, I can get, you know, the object is to stop from all of us from living under the color of law. You know, what you assume is legal because this is happening, you know, between, you know, your public servants, you know. A lot of people tell me if they know that it's their job, why aren't they doing it? You don't know what their job is, so they don't have to do it. And they're not going to, unless you go to court with that job description. You will literally discover that in order to give informed consent, to give that reasonable knowledge to make an informed decision, you literally need the legal knowledge of those you're up against. Because if nobody is discussing the rules, the codes, the oath, the penalties for violating any of that, you know, I'm doing what they should be doing, what's in the public interest. I went over that with you, the legal obligations of doing what's in the public interest. The Constitution requires that all public servants serve the greater good, nothing in self-interest, nothing for personal gain. Public servants are public property. It's in the public trust doctrine. It's also in the basic obligations of public service. Besides in the oath and, you know, the oath of public service, clearly violating the oath of public service. So many mandatories in the oath of public service. They all have the oath of office, but they also have the oath of public service, which is nobody's going to mention to you because there's a whole lot of stuff in there that's required. And they don't want you to know. That's all. They don't want you to know. You know, it's been like this since the Constitution was written. But back then, illiteracy was in vast abundance. Today is not the case. When I was young, I had to use the Dewey Decimal System to maneuver my way through the literature that I needed to find to acquire the knowledge that I'm sharing with you today. So take advantage of that. You know, anything and everything I say, I speak about are nothing but laws, and I always recite it word for word to the letter as required by the letter of the law. Penalties for violating the letter of the law are fines, removal from public service, and incarceration. And if death occurs in those violations, one can easily get the death sentence, death penalty. It's true, look it up. Look it up, it's on the internet. I did a video just reading them to you. Some guy told me in one of my videos on YouTube that I appreciate your work, but you got it wrong or something. And he started throwing some unnecessaries out there. And I could explain to you, I could go on forever, so I suggested he did. And mentioned that the penalties, I just mentioned there are penalties for violating a letter of the law. And violating the letter of law evolves into disinformation, which there are penalties for that. So I will hold you to that. No reply. No reply. Because if he was a lawyer, he knew if he said anything other than what I read off the internet, which was the law, that's immediately disinformation, immediately violating the letter of the law, immediately violating the oath, immediately violating the rules of professional conduct. I can go on and on. Listen, I didn't go to law school. I applied a couple of times in my 20s. I couldn't afford it, but I enjoyed the argument with them. And the last time I tried was maybe about 12 years ago, trying to get grants and stuff. But I wanted to go on the fast track. They were offering me 2, maybe 3 classes a week. I said, how about 1, maybe 2 classes a day, depending on the class. They told me they didn't think I could handle it. I says, I went to college before for computer electronics, which is way harder than this. And I had 2 classes a day, 5 days a week. So it turned into kind of a little argument with whoever these people were, the teachers, the instructors, professors, whatever. Said they didn't want to debate technicalities of the rule of law, of qualified immunity. Because I compared them. I said, qualified immunity is clearly repugnant to the rule of law, so it cannot exist. It was qualified immunity was established in '67 under Pearson versus Ray under the good faith clause. The cops thought that sign on the wall was law, so they arrested some white priests from sitting with some black priests, because, segregation was a thing back then, but that violated the rule of law, thus violating the Constitution, the oath, Well, when the priests protested, they were just waiting for the boss. There was a big ruckus, but the ruckus was from the police wanting them not to sit in the coloreds only section. And they were just waiting for their bus so they could leave. But you know how clergy are, Well, the ones, that live up to the 10 Commandments. It don't matter what color you are. It don't matter what language you speak or how many you speak. When you speak on the Almighty, as the Almighty might say it, if he did say it, and if we could hear him, on this planet, there's but one race, the human race. But either way, this is part of what I'm letting you know what you're dealing with, the society within our society, the justice system, all those that took the oath, what we pledge allegiance to, and not just what, but to whom, we the people, they took an oath to. So these are their legal obligations. That's all I'm reviewing with you, okay? Nothing but peace and love to you people. May your Creator always be with you and rain many blessings. Long life and good health. Thank you for listening.